Hello everyone, welcome to Michigan Man MTG. Today we're looking at Thursday's previews for Marvel Spider-Man. We got a lot of interesting cards to talk about, but before we dive in, remember to like and subscribe to get further content like this throughout Marvel Spider-Man preview season and beyond. And next week I'll be coming out with my top 10 list for rares, mythics, and uncommons from the set for standard. Alright, so let's dive into today's previews. So our first card is Jackal, Genius Geneticist, for a green and a blue mana. You get a legendary creature that's a human scientist villain and is a 1/1 with trample. And whenever you cast a creature spell with mana value equal to Jackal's power, copy that spell, except the copy isn't legendary. Then put a +1/+1 counter on Jackal. So I think, probably the first activation won't be difficult, but if you can consistently get this to activate turn after turn, meaning you're playing a 1 mana spell, then a 2 mana spell, then a 3 and a 4, you can grow the Jackal to be a relatively large creature early in the game. But also you're going to get all those copies of everything. So I think because of that, this is a card that potentially is a build around in Standard from Spider-Man. Next, we've got Morlun, Devourer of Spiders for X and 2 black mana. You get a legendary creature that's a vampire villain and is a 2/1 with lifelink. And Morlun enters with X +1/+1 counters on him. When Morlun enters, he deals X damage to target creature. So you play this on turn 5 for 5 mana, you do 3 damage to your opponent, and you get 3 +1/+1 counters. So I think this is a very scalable card from the set that has standard playability because it's got lifelink, and that scalability, I believe, is something that people will want to take advantage of in standard, and also that ability to just do damage to your opponent in black, I think is an ability that's good enough to see standard play. Next, we've got the Death of Gwen Stacy for 2 and a black mana. You get a Saga. On Chapter 1, you can destroy target creature. On Chapter 2, each player may discard a card. Each player who doesn't loses 3 life. And then on Chapter 3, exile any number of target players' graveyard. So I think, obviously, in Commander, this is a pretty good card where you're going to be able to destroy a creature, and then your opponents will have to decide whether they're going to discard a card or lose 3 life. And then you get to exile any number of target players' graveyards. So because of that, I think that's a pretty powerful ability on this card. Definitely a card that I expect to see Commander play, and maybe there's an outside chance of it seeing Standard play because it is a black card that can exile your opponent's graveyard. Next, we've got another Tri-land from Spider-Man, and this is Urban Retreat. It's a land. This land enters tapped, and it taps for blue, white, or green mana. And then you can pay 2, return a tapped creature you control to its owner's hand, and put this card from your hand onto the battlefield and only activate as a sorcery. So if you pay 2 mana, basically you can play an extra land is what it's saying here, which I don't think is a bad ability. Again, particularly if we have it in a landfall style deck. So definitely going to see play in Standard. The Bant color combination I think is a fairly strong one overall in Standard based on what we're seeing from Spider-Man. So I like this card, and you think that hopefully we'll get a kind of full cycle of these to help out players. Next, we've got Hide on the Ceiling for X and a blue mana. You get an instant. You get to exile X target artifacts and or creatures. Return the exile cards to the battlefield under their owner's control at the beginning of the next end step. So I really like this card. It basically is exiling as many creatures or artifacts as you want that your opponent is either trying to use a board wipe to get them off the battlefield, or maybe some targeted spot removal, and it's a card you want to make sure is safe. So you use this as a mechanism of exiling it, and then it comes back at the beginning of the next end step. So I think this is definitely Standard playable, and I think blue decks will want to use this in Standard. Next, we've got Silk the Web Spinner for 2, a green and a white mana. You can legendary creature that's a spider human hero and is a 3/5 with web slinging for 1, a green and a white mana. Again, you may cast this spell for the 3 mana if you also return a tapped creature you control to its owner's hand. And again, we probably will be able to do that pretty consistently, so we can reduce the cost of any of these web slinging creatures. And whenever you cast a creature spell, create a 1/1 green and white human citizen creature token. This to me is a reason to play this in standard, because basically, hey, I'm playing this in a creature deck and I want to play a go wide strategy. I play Silk, I cast creature spells after Silk's on the battlefield, I get an extra 1/1 every time I do that. And then for 5 mana, 3 a green and a white mana, creatures you control get +2/+2 and gain vigilance until the end of the turn. So again, another reason to play the card. Again, if we have a green white Selesnya deck that's either humans or it's a creature based deck, I think Silk has a chance of seeing play in that, just because you're going to be able to consistently create additional creatures every time you put another creature into play. And it's the key here, it's on casting. So even if your opponent is able to counter the spell, you still are going to get that 1/1 green and white human citizen token, which I think is definitely worth playing this card in standard for. Next, we've got Arachne Psionic Weaver for 2 and a white mana. You get a legendary creature that's a spider human hero and is a 3/3 with web slinging of 1 white mana. And when Arachne enters the battlefield, look at an opponent's hand, then choose a non-creature card type. Spells of the chosen type cost 1 more to cast. So, this is the ability to, in essence, tax one type of card. So if your opponent is playing a lot of instants in their deck, or sorceries, or artifacts, you can go ahead and give that additional tax to that type of card that they would be playing, which early in the game I think will have a tremendous amount of impact on the game, because it'll prevent your opponent maybe from playing some things because they won't have that additional 1 mana they need to play those spells. Next, we've got Bio-Organic Carapace for 2, a white and a blue mana. You get an artifact, that's an equipment, and when this equipment enters the battlefield, attach it to target creature you control. Equipped creature gets +2/+2 and has, whenever this creature deals combat damage to a player, draw a card for each modified creature you control, and its equipped cost is 2. I think this is standard playable in the right deck, where you're going to have modified creatures naturally, whether it's +1/+1 counters or other things that are going to go on those creatures. And then you're going to get additional card draw from this every time you do combat damage with this creature that's being this equipment is going to be attached to. So I'd look to probably attach this to a flyer where I can consistently get that damage through, and then I'll be able to draw cards from all the creatures I've got modified, and that tends to be a strong ability in standard and in other formats. Next, we've got Maximum Carnage for 4 and a red mana. You get a saga. On chapter 1 until your next turn, each creature attacks each combat if able, and attacks a player other than you if able. So really strong commander card and a commander ability there, basically forcing your opponents to attack, and they can't attack you unless it's a single, we're playing a traditional standard game where it's one-on-one. On chapter 2, you get 3 red mana to use, and then on chapter 3, this saga deals 5 damage to each opponent. So overall, I think it's a solid Magic card. Is it standard playable? Probably not, but I think it'll be very solid in Commander. Next, we've got Villainous Wrath for 3 and 2 black mana. You get a sorcery. Target opponent loses life equal to the number of creatures they control, then destroy all the creatures. So it's a new black board wipe, which I feel is pretty solid and strong, especially if you're playing it as a sideboard card and you're going to bring it in against players that are playing a lot of creatures, and you cast it on turn 5 and you wipe their board out, but they also then lose some life. equal to the number of creatures you just killed. So that could have that doubling effect of really reducing their life total and also clearing up their board of creatures your opponent controls. Next we have Friendly Neighborhood for 3 and a white mana. You get an enchantment, that's an aura, and it's an enchant land. When this aura enters the battlefield, create 3 1/1 green and white human citizen creature tokens. And the enchanted land has, for 1 mana, target creature gets +1/+1 until end of turn for each creature you control, and you get to activate that only as a sorcery. So I think this is a solid card. Now, is it going to cause you to build a deck around this? Probably not. But I think if you've got a deck where you've got a lot of creatures that have trample, certainly I think this is a fine card to use in Standard. Next, we've got Mr. Negative for 5 and a white and a black mana. You get a legendary creature that's a human villain, is a 5/5 with vigilance and lifelink. And when Mr. Negative enters the battlefield, you may exchange your life total with target opponent. If you lose life this way, draw cards equal to the amount of life lost this way. So really interesting card here. I don't think it's going to be Standard playable. I think this was meant for Commander, because 7 mana in Standard, basically unless I'm trying to reanimate this, I'm not going to be playing it. And right now we have better reanimation targets than this in Standard. So because of that, I don't think it's going to be Standard play, but in Commander, I think this is going to be a solid card, where you in the mid game are playing this and you're exchanging life total with somebody who has a little bit less life than you do, but with the knowledge that you're going to gain life with Mr. Negative over the course of the next several turns and replace any life you're losing. And then you get that added card draw. And I think because of that, Commander players will look to use this. All right, let's go to the lower rarity stuff we saw for the day. The first is Amazing Acrobat. For 1 and 2 blue mana, you get an instant. You can either counter a target spell or tap 1 or 2 creatures. So I like the flexibility on this. And you can do both of those as well, which I think makes it a little bit more usable as a 3 mana counter spell. Next, we've got Robotics Mastery. For 4 and a blue mana, you get an enchantment, that's an aura, with flash. And you get to enchant a creature, and when this aura enters, you get to create 2 1/1 colorless robot artifact creature tokens with flying. And then the enchanted creature gets +2/+2. Again, limited playable, probably won't see any play outside of that. Next, we've got Prison Break. For 4 and a black mana, you get a sorcery. Return target creature card from your graveyard to the battlefield with an additional +1/+1 counter on it. And you can cast this for its mayhem cost for 3 and a black mana. If you discard it, you can play it from your graveyard to go ahead and get a creature out for only 4 mana. So we're seeing cards like this see play in Standard. So I would think that this is a card that deck builders that are trying to reanimate things would consider using. Next, we've got Sandman's Quicksand. For 1 and 2 black mana, you get a sorcery with mayhem of 3 and a black mana. All creatures get -2/-2 until end of turn. If the spell's mayhem cost was paid, creatures your opponents control get -2/-2 until end of turn. So if you play it for its mayhem cost, it's not going to affect your creatures. It'll only affect your opponent's creatures. So I think that possibility makes this worth a possible consideration in Standard, because it's kind of a one-way, hopefully, board wipe, or at least reducing the power and toughness of your opponent's side, so maybe you can attack in successfully. And because of that, I think it's got maybe some sideboard possibilities in Standard, but I don't think it's main deckable. Next, I've got Venomized Cat. For 2 and a black mana. You get a Symbiote Cat villain. That's a 2/3 with Death Touch. And when this creature enters the battlefield, mill 2 cards. Yeah, it's a limited playable card. Next, we've got Living Brain Mechanical Marvel. For 4 mana. You get a legendary artifact creature, robot villain. It's a 3/3. At the beginning of combat on your turn, target non-equipped creature you control becomes an artifact creature with base power and toughness 3/3 until end of turn, and untap it. So really interesting ability on there where you can, take target non-equipped equipment artifact and turn it into a creature and give it base power of 3/3 until end of turn. So I think with all of the, whether it's map tokens or clue tokens we've got running around in standard, Living Brain could be a very good card. You play it pre-combat on your main phase, and then when you begin combat, you turn one of your tokens into a 3/3, it untaps, and then you get to attack with it. So I think, decent card in limited, and possibly a decent card in standard too. Next, we've got Mysterio's Phantasm. For 1 and a blue mana, you get an illusion villain. That's a 1/3 with flying and vigilance. And whenever this creature attacks, you get to mill a card. So again, probably just limited playable. We're probably not going to see any standard play. Next, we've got Silver Sable, Mercenary Leader for 2 and a white mana. You get a legendary creature that's a human mercenary hero, and is a 2/3. And when Silver Sable enters the battlefield, put a +1/+1 counter on another target creature. So you got to have another target creature to get the +1/+1 counter off of Silver Sable. And whenever Silver Sable attacks, target modified creature you control gains lifelink until end of turn. And I think because of that lifelink additional ability for a modified creature, it's definitely going to be a solid limited card, but it might have some standard playability as well. Next, we've got Spider-Man No More. For 1 and a blue mana, you get an enchantment. That's an aura. An enchant creature. Enchanted creature is a citizen with base power and toughness, 1/1. It has defender and loses all other abilities. Limited playable, maybe see some outside chances, some standard play, because you can basically turn off a creature with this spell. Next, we've got Secret Identity. For a blue mana, you can choose 1. Conceal until end of turn. Target creature you control becomes a citizen with base power and toughness, 1/1, and gains hexproof. So if I need to protect something, I can do that with Secret Identity. Or I can play Reveal, and until end of turn, target creature you control becomes a hero with base power and toughness, 3/4, and gains flying and vigilance. And I see that as probably the part of this that makes this standard playable. Imagine doing that on Tifa. So now Tifa Lockhart is a 3/4 with flying and vigilance and trample. And every time you're putting those lands into play, you're going to be doubling that power. So you do this the first time. Now it's first time that land hits the battlefield, it's a 6/4. Second time it's a 12/4. And if you've been able to put any counters on it over the course of the game, it's just going to get bigger and bigger. And Tifa probably can one-shot the opponent, possibly with Secret Identity. All right, next we've got Alien Symbiosis. For 1 and a black mana, you get an enchantment. That's an aura. You get to enchant a creature. An enchanted creature gets +1/+1, has menace, and is a symbiote in addition to its other types. You may cast this card from your graveyard by discarding a card in addition to paying its other costs. So the nice thing about this one, I think, is the ability to get it back from the graveyard by discarding another card. So maybe in the mid to late game, your opponent's killed the creature this was on, and it's in the graveyard now. You discard a land, and now you can play Alien Symbiosis for that 2 mana again, which I think makes it, potentially playable because of the recursiveness in standard. Next, we've got the Spots Portal. For 2 and a black mana, you get an instant. Put target creature on the bottom of its owner's library, and you lose 2 life unless you control a villain. So I like this as a way to get rid of a card. Maybe I'm not sending it to the graveyard, I'm not sending it to exile, but I'm putting it in the bottom of my opponent's deck, which means they're probably not going to be able to play it. So a good removal card in limited, certainly, and I think has an outside chance of seeing some standard play. Next, we got some red cards. The first is Wisecrack. For 2 and a red mana, you get an instant. Target creature deals damage equal to its power to itself. If that creature is attacking, Wisecrack deals 2 damage to that creature's controller. So obviously you're going to be targeting one of your opponent's creatures with this spell. And then hopefully, if it's attacking, then you get to do 2 additional damage to your opponent, which I think is worthwhile in standard as a sideboard option. So maybe that's where this would fit in the game, where you're going to be able to have your opponent's creatures basically kill themselves if their power is equal to their toughness or their power is greater than their toughness. Next, we've got Superior Foes of Spider-Man. For 2 and a red mana, you get Human Rogue Villain. That's a 3/3 with trample. And whenever you cast a spell with mana value 4 or greater, you may exile the top card of your library. If you do, you may play that card until you exile another card with this creature. So I like the fact that with Superior Foes of Spider-Man, you exile that card when you play that 4 mana creature or spell, but you don't lose the card you're exiling until you cast another spell that's 4 mana or greater. And I think that increases its standard playability, because if you're lucky, you cast this and you're able to play that card on this turn if it's a land, or on the next turn. Then you cast your 4 mana or greater spell, and you get to do it all over again. And I like the recursiveness of it. So we'll have to see where it fits in Standard. All right, now we have a green card in Wall Crawler for 3 and a green mana. You get an enchantment. When this enchantment enters the battlefield, create a 2/1 green spider creature token with reach. Then you gain 1 life for each spider you control. So again, this is one of those cards that in limited is good. Probably won't see any standard play, but spiders you control do get +1/+1 and can't be blocked by creatures with Defender. So there are some upsides of this as well. But again, I think this is more of a limited card than it is a standard card. All right, moving on, we've got Morbius, the Living Vampire, for 2, a blue, and a black mana. You get a legendary creature that's a human scientist villain and is a 3/1 with flying, vigilance, and lifelink. So a lot of great abilities on Morbius. And then for a blue and a black mana, you can exile this card from your graveyard and look at the top 3 cards of your library and put one of them into your hand and the rest on the bottom of your library in any order. So I think in limited, definitely a card I'd be wanting to play. And I think it has an outside chance of seeing some standard play. Next, we've got Shriek, Tremble Maker, for 2 and a hybrid black-red mana. You legendary creature that's a mutant villain and is a 2/3. And at the beginning of your first main phase, you may discard a card. When you do, target creature can't be blocked this turn. And it also has Sonic Blast. Whenever a creature an opponent controls dies, Shriek deals 1 damage to that player. So anytime you kill an opponent's creature, then you go and they lose a life for every time you do that. So I think, again, in limited, probably a good card, but I don't think it's going to be seeing any standard play. Next, we've got Sunspider, Nimble Webber, for 3 and a hybrid white-blue mana. It's a legendary creature, spider-human hero, 3/2, and during your turn, Sunspider has flying, and when Sunspider enters the battlefield, search your library for an aura or equipment card, reveal it, put it in your hand, and then shuffle. So the fact that this can go get an equipment card, I think is okay for 4 mana, but again, where does it fit in the standard? We'd have to have a dedicated aura or enchantment deck for this to be really good, and if we do, I think the ability to go get that is certainly a help to make the card playable. All right, we got our last few cards for the day, and the first is going to be Spider Slayer, Hatred Honed. For 2 mana, you legendary artifact creature that's a human villain and is a 2/1. And whenever Spider Slayer deals damage to a spider, destroy that creature. So it basically has Death Touch for spiders. And for 6 mana, you can exile this card from your graveyard and then create 2 tapped 1/1 colorless robot artifact creature tokens with flying. So kind of the combination of things on here, I think, is interestingly enough for me to want to at least try it in standard, but probably is not going to be something that really and truly does see standard play. Next, we've got Spider-Girl, Legacy Hero, for a green and a white mana. You get a legendary creature, Spider-Human Hero, 2/2, and during your turn, Spider-Girl has flying, and when Spider-Girl leaves the battlefield, create a 1/1 green and white human citizen token. So again, 2 mana, 2/2 flyer on your turn, it's okay. Limited playable, definitely, but I'm not sure if it's good enough for standard. All right, we got our last 2 cards of the day, and the first one I'm going to talk about is Molten Man, Inferno Incarnate. For 2 and a red mana, you legendary creature that's an elemental villain. When Molten Man enters the battlefield, search your library for a basic mountain card, put it onto the battlefield tapped, and then shuffle. And Molten Man gets +1/+1 for each mountain you control. And when Molten Man leaves the battlefield, you have to sacrifice a land. So again, I think this is potentially a very good card, because if you're playing this in a mono red style deck, well, you're going to have the mana to cast it hopefully by turn 3, but most of those things are going to be mountains. So with that in mind, you could, in the mid to late game, Molten Man could have 5, 6, or more power, and I think that makes it interesting as a play option in Standard. All right, our last card of the day is University Campus. This is going to be our Azorius land from the set. It taps for either white or blue mana, and it's going to enter tapped. And again, it has our Surveil ability. For 4 mana, you can Surveil 1. All right, those were the previews from Thursday for Marvel Spider-Man. We got a lot of interesting cards from the set today, which I think leaves us with a place where I think overall the set is going to be pretty good, and hopefully can help shake up Standard a little bit to get rid of the VV nonsense and threat that's going on. Obviously, if you've been playing Arena lately, because Mono Red won the Spotlight Series in Orlando last weekend, a lot of people are trying that deck. But VV is still a huge part of the metagame, and I'm hoping that a deck from Spider-Man will help push that deck down in terms of its popularity in Standard, but we'll see what happens. So thanks for staying to the end of the video. I've left you my playlist for all my Spider-Man videos, and if you wouldn't mind, subscribe to get further content like this throughout Spider-Man preview season and beyond. Thanks. I'll see you in the next one.